Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Trip I'll Never Forget, submitted by Richie Rich. I was 27 years old when this happened. No, I'm not rich. I always thought I had a pretty good handle on what scary meant. Haunted houses, horror movies, maybe even a sketchy guy at the gas station at night. But nothing prepares you for the kind of fear that settles into your bones when you realize that your life might be ending in someone else's living room. My girlfriend at the time, Rachel, and I had booked a week-long Airbnb just outside of Miami Beach. We're from Louisiana. We'd been dating for a couple of years at that point, thinking about marriage, which we are now married. And this was supposed to be one of those fun trips, the kind you look back on later and say, yeah, that was perfect. And at the beginning, it really was. The house I had rented was unreal. Gated neighborhood, palm trees lining the streets, everything manicured like a magazine cover. The house itself looked like something you'd see on one of those real estate shows on HGTV. White stucco, massive windows, private pool in the back, and a jacuzzi that lit up electric blue at night. Inside was just as amazing. Clean and modern, perfect. The first night we were there, we went out and had drinks and came back late, just crashed. Nothing weird, no signs that anything was off. The second night was when everything went sideways. We'd gone out to dinner, nothing fancy, just somewhere by the water, and we came back around 10:30. Rachel changed into her bikini and I grabbed a couple of beers, laughing and talking about getting into the jacuzzi. Just carefree, dumb happiness you don't question in the moment. I had just slid the back door open when the front doorbell rang. It startled me. The sound cut through the house sharp and suddenly, and Rachel looked over at me with her eyebrows raised. "You expecting someone?" she asked. "Yeah, right," I said. "Probably the wrong house." I walked to the front door and checked through the peephole, and there was a guy standing there smiling, mid-30s maybe. Clean cut, casual clothes. He didn't look threatening at all. If anything, he looked friendly. So I opened the door just a crack and said, "Yeah?" His smile widened. "Ricardo, finally, my man." I just frowned at him and said, "You got the wrong place, buddy." He just stood there looking at me. Then he blinked and said, "Ricardo," like maybe I was the one confused. "Nope," I said, "I'm not Ricardo. Wrong house." And I started to close the door, but his hand came up, not pushing it open, but just kind of resting it there, holding it open. "You sure, Ricardo?" "Yeah, buddy, I'm sure." And this time I forcefully shut the door. Rachel was standing halfway down the hallway watching me and said, "Who was that?" I said, "I don't know. Wrong guy. Looking for somebody named Ricardo." We both laughed it off, and it felt like one of those harmless mix-ups you'd tell in a story later. But then the doorbell rang again, and again, and again. It wasn't frantic. It was just persistent, like this guy really believed I was lying to him. "Don't answer it," Rachel said, and I assured her I wasn't going to. We stood there listening as the bell echoed through the house every few seconds, and it went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Then it stopped. I snuck back over to the peephole, looked through it, and he was gone. We shook it off and got into the hot tub and put some music on. But honestly, the mood was a little off then. Planning on fooling around, every little sound made me look towards the house. About an hour later, we were drying off and heading inside when the doorbell rang again. This time, it didn't feel like a mistake. "Rich, don't answer it," Rachel said. "I'm just going to tell him again," I said, already halfway to the door. I don't know why, but I didn't look through the peephole. I just opened the door. Maybe because the guy didn't seem dangerous the last time he was here, and maybe because part of me didn't want to look scared. But as hindsight is 20/20, it was the worst decision I made. The moment the door cracked open, the smile on the guy's face was gone. But what was in my face was a gun. Everything seemed to slow down, and all I could see was this black barrel of a gun. I remember the smell of this guy's cologne wafting over me. "Ricardo," he said, "we need to talk." Before I could even react, two guys appeared out of nowhere and pushed in behind him. One grabbed my shoulder and shoved me back into the house, and Rachel screamed. One of the guys, I don't know which one, yelled, "Shut up!" and they slammed the door behind them. The first guy kept the gun trained on me, and they forced us into the living room, and he told us to sit down. So, yeah, you better believe we sat. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out, and Rachel was gripping my hand so tight it actually hurt. "You got something that doesn't belong to you, Ricardo," the guy said, walking in front of us. "Boss wants his merchandise." "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about," I said, raising one hand at him, but my voice sounded shaky. He stopped in and leaned close to me. "The Coke, puta, the Coke." Rachel flinched. I knew a little bit of Spanish and knew that was not a good word. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not Ricardo. I don't have anything. We just rented this place." The guy stared at me, searching my face, and for a second I thought maybe he believed me. And then his jaw tightened. "No fucking games, Ricardo." "I'm not Ricardo," I said, this time kind of pleading. One of the other guys was standing behind us now, and I could feel him standing there without even turning around to look at him. The guy with the gun straightened up and pulled out his phone. "Yeah, mijo," he said, switching to Spanish. I did pick up that he said something like, "He says he doesn't have it." Then he just listened to the phone and started walking back and forth. His tone shifted quieter, and everything got more and more tense. He was talking so fast I couldn't understand most of what he was saying, but I didn't need to. All I could tell was the phone call wasn't going well. Finally, he hung up. "All right, Ricardo, boss is coming," he said, sighing. "He's not happy." The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I don't think anybody talked save for Rachel saying, "He's not Ricardo, he's not Ricardo," and one of the other guys telling her to shut up. I was fixated on the gun that was still trained on us and never left us. Rachel started crying, but silently, and I kept thinking, this is it. We're fucking dead, in some stranger's house because of a name mix-up. I heard a car pull up and saw headlights flashing through the front windows, and one of the guys went to the door and opened it. The guy who walked in felt different immediately. He was older, maybe late 40s, early 50s. Dressed in a dark suit and perfectly put together. It sounds odd saying this, but his presence filled the room in a way the others didn't. Like you were going to see Tony Robbins speak or something like that. The guy looked at me. Then he looked at the guy with the gun. He exploded. Rapid Spanish that I couldn't keep up with, but I could tell he was pissed. Even without understanding the words, the meaning was clear. Something had gone very wrong. The guy with the gun started trying to explain, waving his hands around and gesturing towards me. But this other guy cut him off, stepped forward, and ripped the gun out of his hand like it was nothing. Then he turned to us, and for a second, everything went completely still. He gave a small, almost polite nod and said, "Perdón, amigo." He said it calmly. "Mi asociado tiene el hombro equivocado." I picked up that he was saying that his friend mistook me for somebody else. Then after a beat he said, "Mis disculpas, que tengo una mejor noche." His tone was almost courteous. Like we just had a minor inconvenience, not had a gun shoved in our faces and our lives threatened. He glanced at Rachel for the first time, and something like a smile even touched his face. "You are very beautiful," he told her. And then he said to both of us, "I hope you have a better evening." And just like that, he turned around and left. The other guys followed him out without a word. They closed the door, we heard the car pull away, and there was silence. For a few minutes, we didn't move. Everything felt like it was unreal, like we were in a dream. I jumped up, locked the door, locked it again, and then ran around the house checking every window and the back door. Rachel was shaking. I called the homeowner. There was no answer. I called the police, and they came out. Took a report, walked through the house, and one of them kept saying how lucky we were. Finally, he said, "There's not much we can do. But you're safe, and that's what matters." Safe my ass. We didn't stay there that night. We grabbed our stuff and left for a hotel. The next morning, my phone woke me up ringing, and it was the homeowner finally calling back. He was super apologetic and really confused. He apologized for not getting my call the night before and said the Ring doorbell was broken. He had no idea who those people could have been. Then he offered us the rest of the week at the place for half price. We should have said no, but we didn't. We went back. And somehow, unbelievably, we tried to enjoy the rest of the trip. The next night we were sitting on the couch with the TV on, both of us still more than a little on edge, but trying to be normal. Then the doorbell rang. Rachel grabbed my arm immediately and said, "Don't you dare answer it." My stomach dropped, but something in me, probably curiosity, or this need to prove I wasn't scared, got me up and pulled me toward the door. I checked the peephole. It was a delivery guy standing there, holding a huge bouquet of roses and a box. I opened the door slowly, and the guy said, "Delivery for Ricardo?" My blood ran cold. "There's no Ricardo here," I started to say. But he looked down at the note and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it says to just leave it here." He handed the flowers and the box over. And inside the box was a bottle of Dom Perignon. Attached was a small card that said, "My apologies again. Enjoy Miami." No name, no explanation. I locked the door and went back down and sat next to Rachel. We did drink the Dom, and we finished the trip. We went out, went to the beach, did all the things we were supposed to do before the unpleasantness. And on the surface, it did end up being a good trip. And now it is a fun story to tell my friends and family. But when I think about it, I go back to that moment, the gun and the silence, and the way that guy looked at me like he was deciding whether I was worth killing or not. But for a long time, the only thing that I knew in my mind was the next vacation we were taking was not going to be Miami. Have to Get This Story Out by Skeptical91. This may be a little long-winded, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible to not bore anybody. However, this is something I just need to get off my chest. I'll start by saying that I'm a skeptic when it comes to practically anything supernatural. I fully believe there's a natural explanation for things that seem unexplainable, even now. The problem is, I just can't seem to think of a logical explanation, not that there isn't one. So I'd like other people to hear this story, and maybe someone can come up with a rational explanation. I live in the UK. It's currently 4:58 a.m., and I just can't sleep thinking about this. This past weekend, me and a couple of friends decided to venture into some local woodland like we've done a few years prior. Life had gotten in the way, and this past weekend was a rarity when we were all free, so we decided for old time's sake we'd make most of it and do it again. The plan was like usual. Head into the woods, get a fire going, have some beers, have a laugh with no distractions, and camp until daylight. Then we'd head home. Since the woodland was within walking distance, we headed into the trees. I'm the most experienced in the outdoors and was carrying all of the camping gear, the axe, knife, cooking tools, etc. Another pal who's as strong as an ox was carrying all the beers, and my other buddy was just carrying a backpack of snacks and barbecue food. Long story short, I know this stretch of woodland relatively well, and I had a place I'd camped at my own during COVID. I planned to take us all there. I'd found an old wheelbarrow and turned it into an awesome little makeshift fire pit and wanted to get it going again. However, even though I'd followed my previous path, I couldn't seem to find my last little camping spot. It wasn't just a wheelbarrow I was looking for. There was a distinctive Y-shaped tree and patch of clear, flat ground in front of it. Pretty unusual in woodlands full of bushes. Anyway, after a while I gave up, and it was getting to nearly 6 p.m., so we didn't have loads of daylight left, and I wanted us to set up camp and get some wood cut before we hunkered down. We found a reasonable spot, and nothing like my last campsite, but it would do. We got the fire going, cracked the beers, and night rolled in. We agreed to keep off of our phones, but kept them switched on just in case of emergency. However, phone reception was practically non-existent anyway. At around 11 p.m. or so, we had a decision to make: camp or go home. Now, I was happy to stay, and so was my other pal, the beer carrier, we'll call him. But my other mate wanted to head home. He didn't fancy roughing it out by a fire, which was fair enough. I agreed to navigate him out of the woods and come back to my other friend, who I just told to keep the fire roaring so it would be easier for me to get back. Well, off we went. It took us a while, but I managed to get us out of the woods, granted a little ways from where we'd entered, but enough for my friend to go alone as he could see the road. Now I just had to turn back and go back to my friend by the fire. As I was walking back, I figured I was maybe halfway. I couldn't see any flickering of a fire, but I heard a male voice make a sort of beckoning sound over to my left. It kind of sounded like my friend by the fire, but not 100%. Sure enough, I heard it again. Something told me to not shout back. The voice didn't seem right. I wanted to just get back to my friend by the fire, but at the same time, what if he got nervous being alone, and he tried to follow us out and got lost? I kept pushing forward towards where I knew the fire was, and every now and again turning off my headlight just looking for the flickers of the fire in the distance. Sure enough, I managed to see the faint flickers of fire, and my friend's torch beaming towards me. His massive frame soon came into view, and he just said my name with an obvious distress in his voice. I replied, "Yeah, it's me. Were you just shouting?" By this point, we were both by the fire, and I could see he was shaken up. He said he wasn't shouting, but he thought he heard someone laughing. Strangely enough, from roughly the same direction I heard the half-beckoning shout. I told him to relax. We had an axe and a knife and a machete. He's built like a tank, and I'm 6'1" and fairly broad. Nobody was going to mess with us on purpose, surely. It's likely just the wind, I said. They mind playing tricks on us. Just as we were about to crack open some fresh beers, we heard a loud metallic clang, coming from the same direction. We both bolted up. He had his knife, I had a hand axe, and we both just froze looking at each other. Now it was obvious. This wasn't the wind. We decided enough was enough and filled our backpacks with everything of value. Once we were sure we had everything, we doused the fire and started to head out. I decided the best way would be to go the way I had just come from, a bit further from our initial entry point, but I'd just come from that direction, so I figured it would be easier, even in the pitch dark. We were headed back the way I had literally just come from perhaps 10 minutes before. And then it was just there. The wheelbarrow I'd used before during COVID. Same rusty hole near the bottom corner. Inside charred black with the fire I'd had roaring over 4 years ago. My friend didn't react because he hadn't been this way yet. I'd been looking for the wheelbarrow, so I definitely would have noticed it before. And it was definitely not the campsite I'd been to prior. Then I noticed a black glove just below the wheelbarrow. It looked almost new and had rubber fingertips, just like my friend's who'd I'd escorted out no more than 30 minutes ago. Neither of us touched the glove. We just marched past. My original path out didn't matter. I was just straight-line booking it until we got to a clearing. And just as the trees thinned, an almighty metal bang was heard behind us, again. And I have no shame in admitting, at that point, we both ran. It sounded like a sledgehammer smashing against something metal. We went through a field and didn't bother finding the exit. We just climbed the fence that was there. Neither of us are small or super athletic, so this really wasn't something we'd choose to do usually. We found ourselves practically on the other side of the woods that we'd entered. We just headed to the nearest streetlight, and neither of us really knew what to say. It was obvious we were both shaken up. I'd camped alone loads of times. I'm used to funny noises, and my mind playing tricks once in a while. This wasn't that. Not only that, those woods aren't exactly popular. You never see litter, there's no actual paths or dog walking trails through there. In fact, the only foreign item I've ever seen there in over 10 years of going there was that wheelbarrow. Well, the first thing I did when we were out was call my friend who'd I'd escorted out originally. Now, he was not experienced in the woods, and he didn't have his own headlamp or torch. He'd been using my torch. So the likelihood of it being him playing a prank on us was non-existent. But I called him anyway. He was at home. I could hear his girlfriend even talking in the background. When I told him what had happened, he couldn't believe it. He asked me if I picked them up, and I said, "What?" And he said, "My gloves." He'd accidentally left them at our camp when I escorted him out, but he figured we would just grab them in the morning. I was planning on going back to see if the wheelbarrow was there in the daylight, and something just felt off. And even writing this feels like something was seriously wrong with that whole ordeal. My friend who experienced it with me is equal as troubled. How did that wheelbarrow appear in a path that I had just gone by and didn't see? How did my friend's glove get there? And who was making the noises and why? If it was people playing tricks, how are they moving about in the dark with no light? Sorry for the long story. I'm not sure how I could have made it any shorter. The Walk Home, submitted by Aiden. I was 16 in 1992 and a junior in high school when this went down. It was a Friday night, and It was a Friday night when my girlfriend and I made a trip to the mall. My name's Aiden. Back then, my entire universe revolved around my girlfriend, Melissa. She was a sophomore and a year younger than me. Loud, funny, really beautiful, and the kind of girl everyone noticed when she walked into a room. That night, her older sister dropped us off at the mall just outside of the city. Just one of those big, sprawling suburban malls with all the cheesy shops, a food court, and a movie house. Her sister said she was going to come back around 11 to get us, after the movie, and said something dumb like, "Don't wander away, I'll be right here." I remember Melissa slamming the door and telling her that we weren't 12. We spent the next couple of hours walking around, laughing, and trying on clothes, and I burned through almost all of my cash I had buying her stuff. Shirts, a pair of jeans, earrings that she had to have. I didn't care. Making her happy felt like the most important thing in the world. By the time we got to the movie theater and I'd paid for tickets, I only had $1 left in my wallet. But I still felt good, like the night was going exactly how it should have. And then everything changed. We were standing near the theater entrance when I saw them, 3 girls walking towards us. Some of Melissa's friends that I really didn't like, but she was enthralled with. Melissa stiffened next to me, then suddenly lit up like a switch had flipped. "Oh my God," she squealed, letting go of my hand and rushed over to the other girls. I just stood there awkwardly as they all hugged and started talking over each other the way that teenage girls do. One of them glanced at me and kind of smirked. Melissa turned back to me, and the look on her face was different. Like she was annoyed that I was there. I just said, "Hey, you ready to go in?" She crossed her arms and said, "Actually, no." I said, "What are you talking about? We're going to the movie." She just shrugged like it was nothing and said, "I think I'm going to hang out with my friends." And I said, "Okay, after the movie?" And she said, "No, like hang out with them instead of you." The girls behind her started snickering, and I felt my face heat up. "Melissa, what are you talking about?" She just rolled her eyes and said, "Come on, Aiden, don't make a big thing out of this." I said, "A big thing? You're ditching me?" She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No, I'm breaking up with you. Get over it." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You're serious," I said. And she said, "Yeah, no big deal. See you around." Then she just turned with her friends and they all walked away. She didn't even look back. I stood there for a long time in shock. People were walking past me to get into the movie house. But suddenly, everything felt overwhelming. I felt terrible. And eventually, reality started creeping in. I didn't have a ride home. The buses to my part of the city stopped running at 9, and it was already past 9. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and I only had a couple of quarters in my pocket, and really nobody to call. Well, I did make some calls, but either no one picked up or I was getting answering machines of my friends' parents. I just stood there outside of the arcade not knowing what to do. And then finally I realized, well, only one thing I can do. Walk home. I stepped out into the parking lot, the only part of the parking lot that still had cars because of the movie house. This was it. I had to walk the 4 miles back to my house. 4 miles through parts of a city that everyone at school knew to avoid, especially at night. I pumped myself up for a second and said, "Hey, it's not going to be that bad. Just keep moving, stay on the main streets, you're going to be fine." As I mentioned, I'm a confident guy, but my confidence wasn't really that strong at that point. The first mile wasn't bad, just quiet streets and the occasional car passing by. But as I went farther into the city, on the east side, the streets grew dimmer and farther apart. All the storefronts were boarded up and graffiti was all over the place. And I started hearing things. Shouts in the distance, glass breaking somewhere far off, just those sounds that'll get you off your game. Then I saw the guys standing on a corner that I had to walk by. 5 or 6 guys, older than me. They were just hanging out under the streetlight, and one of them noticed me immediately. I stuck out like a sore thumb. "Hey," he called out, "where you going, man?" I kept walking, trying to look like I belonged there. Another one of them shouted out, "Hey, we're talking to you." My heart started hammering. I didn't answer. I just kept moving. And I inevitably heard the footsteps behind me. I risked a glance back, and 2 of the guys had peeled off from the group and were following. "Yo, slow it down," one of them said, and started laughing. I didn't slow it down. I sped up. And so did they. Then one of them yelled, "Run!" And that was all it took. I took off. My sneakers were slapping against the pavement as I just sprinted down the street, not even caring where the hell I was going. I could hear them behind me shouting and laughing, and the sound of their footsteps gaining on me. For some stupid reason, I cut down an alley. I wasn't even using my brain. A big mistake. It was darker there and narrower, and there was trash piled along the sides. Halfway down, I realized it was a dead end. I spun around, panicking. But they hadn't followed me down the alley. I could hear their laughter out in the street, and one of them yelled out, "Ha ha, asshole!" I just stood there trying to catch my breath, every nerve in my body on fire. Then I climbed over the low fence that was at the end of the alley, and of course tore my jeans in the process. I dropped into somebody's backyard, and I didn't stop moving after that. A few blocks later, though, I ran into something else. 2 winos staggering down the sidewalk. I could see the bottles in their hands. They were filthy and shouting at each other. Their voices were all slurred and angry. Of course, one of them saw me. "Hey," one of them said. "Come here, kid." I froze for a second, but just long enough. The guy started pointing at me, saying, "You got any money, man?" I just said no, backing up a little bit. "Don't lie to me," he said, and I could tell he was trying to run at me, but yeah, he was hammered. But then the other one joined in running at me, and they started laughing like the other guys, like all of this was some big joke. I turned and bolted again, cut across the street, not even looking, and almost got clipped by a car. The driver laid on the horn and screamed something at me that I didn't catch, and I didn't give a shit. I just kept running. The rest of the way home was a blur of shadows and my fear. Every sound made me jump, and every passing car felt like it might stop. I stuck to the edges of the streets and ducked behind parked cars when I heard voices, and I took routes I barely recognized just to avoid people if they were walking on the same street I was. By the time I finally got to my block, I was exhausted. My legs felt they were going to give out, my throat was dry, and my heart would not slow down. I got to my house, fumbled with my keys, and got the door open and just slammed it shut behind me. The silence in the house never felt more welcoming. I was home and I was safe. I stumbled into the kitchen, bumped into the refrigerator, opened it up and grabbed a beer out, one of my dad's. I cracked it with shaking hands and then went and collapsed onto the sofa. I flipped on the TV more for a distraction than anything else. I was tired of dealing with what was bouncing around in my head. And there it was on the screen. The Warriors. I just stared at it, barely believing the coincidence. Yeah, The Warriors, that movie about a gang trying to make it home through hostile territory, chased and hunted the whole way. I burst out laughing at that point, probably from all the pent-up stress and anger. I remember saying out loud, "Yeah, you guys, I just did that." I mean, it really didn't feel real. The next day, I told my friends everything, and they laughed at parts of it and couldn't believe a lot of it. It became one of those stories that stuck, and something that I'd bring up every now and again, half joking and half not. The reason I'm sending you this story is, obviously, it's many years later, but a couple months back, I ran into Melissa at a grocery store in town. She didn't recognize me at first. She was too busy arguing with her husband over something stupid. She was yelling at him and telling him that he was an idiot. Then she diverted her attention to her kids, who she was also yelling at. Then she finally realized who I was, and she gave me a dismissive look, and all she said was, "Wow, you look different." I just smiled, because all I could think about in that instant was that night she dumped me, that run home, that fear that I felt. And yeah, it was scary as hell. But truth be told, after seeing her after all these years, nothing could be as scary as still being with her. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. I am in transit and thought I would do a little bit of housekeeping here. Couple of things, follow up to something that people have been asking me about, the photo of Mary Ann. I have not heard back from the OP, and I cannot in good conscience share that image of Mary Ann without that consent. And quite frankly, now that I think about it, it is kind of creepy of me to do that. So I apologize. I know I talked a little bit about sharing that because of the strange coincidence of someone recognizing a person from a story, but I'm not going to let that one die. So my apologies. That will remain a mystery to you guys. Hope that doesn't piss too many people off. Second thing I wanted to talk about real quick was ads on YouTube. I get comments all the time about people thanking me for not having any ads. That's the way this channel will always be. I have ads on my podcast platforms, and I will not do that here. There's a couple of reasons why. And people have also made a connection with that, saying, "Oh, you know what, how come you don't have any more listeners? Or you're awesome, you need to have more listeners, and is it because you don't run ads?" It's quite possible. I don't know if running ads would bring more people to the channel, but neither here nor there with that as far as I know. But I will say this. What's going on with YouTube ads is an abomination. It is, to me, just abhorrent. And here's why. I listen to YouTube or watch YouTube videos on a number of different devices, some of which have YouTube Premium, so I skip the ads for the most part. But some of the devices I do listen on do not have that, and I do have to sit through ads or skip them. And I have absolutely no problem with a 30-second ad, even up to a minute, right? It's fine. It's the nature of the beast, no problem. But what I'm seeing is people buying advertising space for up to 40 minutes. I'll be listening to some of my, go-to podcasts or channels and won't be paying attention to my phone and will suddenly realize, Jesus, how long has this ad been going on? Only to find that somebody has basically put their podcast out there as paid programming inside someone else's podcast or channel, which I think is high bullshit. I mean, yes, eventually I can skip it, but the fact that YouTube is now selling ad space like you would in the 80s and 90s for middle of the night kind of infomercial programs, to me is just insane. You could be listening to a cool podcast and then all of a sudden be listening to somebody's 45-minute podcast selling their dick cream or some kind of miracle protein powder that's going to make you lose weight. To me is insane. I will never do that to you guys. Absolutely not. I find it disturbing that this is actually being allowed. That someone else can stick their bullshit podcast into your podcast, something that you have zero interest in listening to, but there it is. And again, yes, I know all you have to do is go down and skip, but the fact that it's happening is disturbing to me. So the channel will remain ad-free, gang. That's the way it is. It's the way it started 10 years ago, and I'm not changing anything for that. Appreciate everybody who's been sending stories in. Continue to do that. Love getting them. Love narrating them. Uncle Josh, truescarystories@gmail.com. And while you're listening to this, if you could, leave a comment about what you thought of the video. Give it a like. That's still free to do. Helps out in the algorithm naturally. And hope everybody's having a good day no matter where you are around the round world. You guys keep listening. I'll keep narrating. Everybody be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.